Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us today on short notice. I want to begin by providing an update on last night's storms that ripped through northwest part of Mississippi, as well as Tennessee, Arkansas, Missouri, and several other states. Preliminary reports indicate that 6 people in Mississippi were injured as a result of last night's severe weather. 1 in Marshall County, 2 in Tate County, and 3 in Tippah County. Thankfully, as of now, no fatalities have been reported. Since the most severe weather was between midnight and daylight, it is still early, but damage assessments are currently underway. At this time, at least 60 homes have received damage across 5 counties. Those 5 counties are Benton, Bolivar, Marshall, Tate, and Tippah County. The Mississippi Emergency Management Management Agency is in contact with local emergency managers and is in the process of filling requests for tarps, water, and food for impacted counties. As of now, Marshall County has asked for and will receive 200 tarps, 4,000 bottles of water, and over 500 meals ready to eat, or MREs. 50 tarps are being sent to Tate County. Obviously, Mac and his team at MEMA are very busy, and that's why he's not here with us today. But we will continue fulfilling requests and meeting unmet needs as they come in from our local authorities. I encourage Mississippians who've sustained damage from this storm to file an insurance claim, take photos of the damage, and report it via the self-report tool on MEMA's website. Additionally, if you have an immediate unmet need, please contact your county emergency management agency. A list of those county contacts can be found on the MEMA website. I want all Mississippians to know that the state of Mississippi is in this for the long haul, and we will do everything in our power to rebuild and recover as quickly as possible. I ask my fellow Mississippians to please pray for those who were injured, and please pray for their families, as well as those whose homes were damaged. We know there are a lot of Mississippians that are struggling and suffering right now, and we're going to keep them in our thoughts and prayers. Next, I'd like to change topics. I'd like to take just a moment to highlight what I believe to be probably the most underreported story in my tenure as governor, and that is Mississippi's impressive economic growth in 2024. As y'all know, 2024 was a banner year for Mississippi and our state's economy. Last year, we finalized the single largest private sector investment in Mississippi history, the $10 billion AWS project. We announced the largest payroll commitment in state history, with the $2 billion private sector investment by Accelera, by Cummins, Daimler Trucks and Buses, and PACCAR that will create 2,000 jobs up in Marshall County. And we broke new ground on the largest private sector investment in the history of the Mississippi Delta, a $1.2 billion investment by Entergy to build the Delta Blues Advanced Power Station in Greenville. Now, what does all of this capital investment mean? Well, Mississippi was just ranked the second fastest growing economy in all of America in 2024. That's right, number 2 in the nation for GDP growth. Not in the South, not in the Southeast, but in the entire nation. In addition to that, Mississippi was just ranked number 1 in the United States for net personal income growth, and we were number 2 for agriculture, forestry, fishing, and hunting, and number 8 for manufacturing growth. Suffice it to say, our state's economy is strong, and we're doing what it takes to keep the Mississippi momentum going. We're attracting new businesses after new businesses, and we're creating thousands of good paying jobs all across Mississippi. I have to take just a moment to thank our state's greatest asset for making this possible, and that is our people. None of this would have been possible without them, and I am incredibly proud of the results you are putting up every single day on behalf of our state. To all Mississippi, keep up the good work. Now, finally, the hottest topic inside the Capitol complex today is the prospect for a possible special session. As you are all aware, the legislature just adjourned their session this year without passing a budget. Now, look, I'm not saying that's a good thing, but it's certainly not the first time, even in recent history, that this has happened. In fact, since I've been in public office, this is at least the third time the legislature has adjourned without passing a budget. In fact, I have served with 4 lieutenant governors and 3 speakers of the House, and now all but one of those has adjourned a session without a full budget being passed. And the reality is that Mississippi is not only still standing, we are thriving. So, everybody, I encourage you to calm down, relax, and pay no attention to any headlines proclaiming any sort of crisis. I want to assure you, the press here, Mississippi's agencies and agency directors, even some of whom report to me, and most importantly, I want to assure our taxpayers, there is no imminent threat of a government shutdown. Our state government is going to be just fine as we work through this process. The legislature has until July 1st to pass a budget for the next fiscal year. And my team has already verified there will be no interruptions in the usual course of state business in the meantime. I am confident that the House and the Senate will be able to work together and get this done. In fact, I have been in personal communication with legislative leadership over the last several weeks, and I don't think they're really that far apart. And for the question I am sure is at the front of everyone's mind, I do not know the timing of any special session call yet, but we will develop a plan to get the budget passed quickly, efficiently, and ultimately in a way that will benefit the folks we work for. And that, of course, is you, the taxpayers of this state. A budget that upholds state government responsibilities, but also recognizes our values of efficiency and is fiscally responsible. A budget that prioritizes public safety, that spurs development for our people, and that supports our workforce. Also, I don't know at this time if other items will be in a special session call. I know there were a lot of priorities for conservatives that did not get to my desk, so we were having internal detailed conversations as to what else may or may not be asked of the legislature to consider in a potential special session. Again, I'd like to thank all of you for being here today, and I'd be happy to take any questions that you may have.
Can you give any specifics about any issues that could be gone for a special session, such as possibly school choice, local sports betting, etc.?
Well, the question is any details about items that might be considered for a call of a special session. And you mentioned specifically school choice. You mentioned mobile sports betting. I would mention Parents' Bill of Rights, real CON reform. Certainly is an item of interest for many conservatives across Mississippi. And so there are a large number of items. At this point, I will rule nothing out. Y'all know that I am reluctant to add things to a special session. I'm reluctant to call special sessions because of the cost associated with them. But since we do have a special session that's coming up to deal with funding, then that certainly opens the door for consideration of those items. I'm not looking to do a long, drawn-out special session. I have every intention of working with our legislative leaders to make sure that when we come in, that we have a plan and that that plan can then be executed. And again, I think there's a real opportunity to get that done And I hope we get it done sooner rather than later. Yes, sir. Either one's fine.
You've sort of alluded to it, but I know in past special sessions, like with economic development deals, you've briefed legislative leaders, I think, ahead of time, and then called them into a special session, and it was pretty quick. Would you want to kind of do a similar thing with this, where both the Senate and House leadership have at least a gentleman's agreement beforehand, so that way they can get in and get out on a special session, and it wouldn't be long and costly?
Yeah. So the only special sessions that I have called since I have been governor have been special sessions that revolve around large economic development projects. Obviously, we have typically negotiated those details long before the special session is called. We negotiate with those private sector entities, with the local economic development organizations, with the various state agencies that are involved, like the Mississippi Department of Transportation and others, to make sure we can meet the timelines that we lay out. And then we spend time working with the legislative leadership to make sure they are aware and cognizant of the various issues that exist and the deal that we have made with those entities. And I do expect that this particular process will work similarly. I expect there to be substantial, if not 100% agreement as to what that budget's going to look like. That's going to take some time, I would presume, to get that done. I do not have any intention of calling a special session and allowing members, or not even allowing, forcing members to come to Jackson and stand there and stare at one another or fight over the budget for days and weeks or months. I don't have any interest in that. And quite frankly, in my conversations with both the House and the Senate leadership, I don't think they have any interest in that either. That certainly is not going to do anybody any good. But we do have some items that we need to deal with in the current fiscal year. There were several requests for current year budget deficits that need to be dealt with as well. Again, that's not something that has to be dealt with tomorrow, but it is certainly something that needs to be dealt with sooner rather than later. And the other thing I'll just throw out there is, who knows? We've had a lot of successes over the last 5 years in economic development. We may have a reason to call a special session for an economic development deal in the next few months or a year as well. So we're taking into account all of the possibilities, and we're going to give legislative leadership a few days to go their separate ways, to go back into their corners and get some water and towel off and calm down, and then we'll start having those conversations. But again, the critical point here is that that while this is certainly unusual, it is not unprecedented, and for me at least, I think we will continue to have the conversations to get them back eventually to get this done. And as we showed several years ago with the Department of Marine Resources, if in fact there is not the ability to get an agreement, we can run state government, certainly the essential parts of state government, without a budget. We've shown that, and we've proven that, and we are willing to do that. And I would just argue in today's world, with what's going on in Washington, D.C., there is demand from conservative voters all across America that we get government spending under control. And there's certainly an argument to be made that only essential operations in government ought to be funded by the taxpayers. And so we'll be having those conversations. Yes, sir.
Governor, just two quick ones. First of all, in a special session, would you be open or receptive at all to taking another look at those triggers in the income tax cut? Number two, you have I think a new Medicaid tech bill headed to you. Have you had a chance to read that? Do you know what you're going to do on that?
Yeah, so all of the bills that have been passed by the House and the Senate because of the sine die motion that was enacted yesterday by the House and today by the Senate, we will have approximately 15 days to take a look at those. I have not had time to look at all of the specific provisions in the Medicaid tech bill or any other bill at this time. The staff, I am sure, has started that process, and they spend a greater percentage of their time knowing what's happening in those bills than I do. Obviously, with the tremendous amount of economic development that's going on, I'm trying to continue to spend 90% of my time on economic development and bringing better and higher paying jobs to our state. But we will sit down over the next couple of weeks and take a look at those, and we'll make a decision at the appropriate time. I'm trying to think of your other question. Oh, with respect to the bill, obviously the legislature, the House and the Senate made a decision after I signed the One Big Beautiful Bill, which eliminates the income tax in Mississippi, finally, once and for all. An accomplishment that we've been working towards, I feel like, for the entirety of my public service career, but particularly since 2015, when the very first Taxpayer Pay Raise Act was offered, and then 2016 when it was ultimately passed. And so, look, I'm open to consider anything. The House, I think, in that Senate bill wanted to have serious conversations surrounding a dedicated revenue stream to the public employees retirement system. You will recall in House Bill 1, they took the money that is collected from the lottery, which right now goes to the Department of Transportation. And in that HB 1 bill that passed the House, they had taken those lottery proceeds and sent them directly to help fund the unfunded liability of the public employees retirement system. That is certainly something that I am willing to consider. The triggers that exist in state law today require that revenue in 2029 is greater than expenses in 2030 for the triggers to take effect. I'm not really sure how to improve upon that. If you are protecting yourself and revenue is greater than expenditures, the taxpayers ought to get a pay raise, and we ought to reduce the individual income tax. We ought to reduce taxes. And so I'm open to consider whatever needs to be considered. But I think the House Bill 1, in the form in which it was sent to me and the way in which it was signed, puts us on a path that is responsible and makes sense for the taxpayers, and one that, quite frankly, is going to help continue to grow our economy. Many people in 2015, 2016, 2022 claimed, if you pass this bill, you're going to have major government deficits. It's going to destroy your economy. All the same arguments that are being made today were made in 2022, and they've been proven wrong. All of those same arguments were made in 2016, and here we are 10 years later, and those arguments have been proven wrong. I would submit to you that the bill that passed and I signed into law will go into effect. We'll continue to reduce and ultimately eliminate the income tax, and our economy is going to grow significantly because of it. Yes, sir.
You said that having to call a special session at all isn't ideal, but do you think that the budget being decided in a special session could end up being beneficial for the state? Over the past couple of days, a lot of us have heard about hundreds of millions of dollars of federal spending cuts affecting our health department and education department. And so do you think the lawmakers having a better sense of what that looks like in terms of reductions of federal spending when they pass the budget will be helpful?
Yeah, well, let's talk about these hundreds of millions of dollars that have been cut from the federal government and just understand what they are. These are not annual recurring expenditures that keep the government operating. These are programs that were created during the pandemic for pandemic response. That's what they are. I think we can all agree that the pandemic is not here anymore. And so the Biden administration extended and, quite frankly, I would argue in many ways changed the purpose of those funds. But these were funds that were created to respond to the pandemic by the Congress. They have been extended. And so while it's certainly going to create some challenges that need to be worked through, I will be opposed to the state of Mississippi asking our state's taxpayers to fill in the gap for funds that were initially offered by the federal government that are now no longer going to come through. Now, there may be exceptions to that, and we'll certainly look at each and every one of them. But again, the couple of $1 trillion a year more in spending by the federal government today compared to pre-pandemic levels is continuing to add to our deficit. No, by the way, let's not forget that America has $36 trillion in debt. And I say 36, it's been a day or two since I've looked, so it may be 37 trillion now. America is spending $1 trillion a year on interest expense. $1 trillion a year. And we're taking in about $4.5 trillion and spending $6.5 trillion. It is imperative. It's one of the biggest risks that faces America is the ballooning and out of control debt. And I know that everybody likes to point fingers as to it's this president's fault, it's that president's fault, it's this political party's fault, it's that political party's fault. The reality is, it doesn't matter whose fault it is. At least President Trump and his team, whether you like what Elon Musk is doing or not, whether you like what the Department of Government Efficiency is doing or not, at least they have the intestinal fortitude to take this head on. And I personally appreciate that. Yes, sir.
Speaking of Musk, have you heard, is he in or is he out?
In or out of what?
His position. There's reports that the president, have you heard anything?
Well, this will come as a surprise to you, but the president doesn't often call me and ask me my opinion on high-level positions, and the multi-hundred billionaire Elon Musk certainly doesn't call me and ask me what jobs he takes and doesn't take. But my impression is that there is a shelf life for how long Elon is going to be involved in managing the Department of Government Efficiency. I think there was always going to be a shelf life. After all, he does have quite a few private sector jobs as well. And so I don't know if he has 1 day, 1 month, or 1 year left in this current volunteer opportunity. But I do think that the concept will continue. And the concept of finding government efficiencies, the concept of finding things that the federal government are spending money on that they ought not be and cutting them is going to continue throughout the entirety of the Trump administration. And I, for one, believe it should.
Just wanted to switch gears for just a second. The Senate chose not to confirm your Deputy Chief of Staff, Corey Custer, with the MPP board. I was wondering if you had a comment on the Senate's decision and who you might be considering to put up for the board next.
Yeah, I did see that late yesterday. There's no doubt that there are some Republican senators who like to vote with Democrats on really important topics, and they don't like the fact that I call them out on it. They ought to attack me and not attack one of my staff members. He had nothing to do with that. Quite frankly, I think it's chicken shit what they did. But that is their own thing. They are elected by their people in their district, and I'm going to keep working to make sure that we nominate people to positions of power and influence that have conservative views, conservative values. And that's just what I'm going to do. And if for whatever reason some Republicans join with all the Democrats to kill appointees, they'll just have to do that and they'll answer to their voters. Yes, sir.
You mentioned that we've effectively done away with the income tax. You mentioned the triggers too, as well, as far as reaching that goal. And I'm going to piggyback off of what Mike just asked for a clear answer on that. Do you think those triggers could be adjusted to make that goal easier to attain?
Yeah, well, look, I want to eliminate the income tax as quick as possible. I was fine not having any triggers, and I continue to be fine not having any triggers. The Senate wanted there to be triggers in the out years in 2030 to 2040. And that seems like a reasonable thing if that's what they want. And that's the only way we could get the bill done. And so I was fine with that. I'm fine with making it easier to get there quicker. And if they have some sort of plan to do something else, I'm certainly willing to listen. Yes, sir.
I want to circle back to the federal funds being inked back. While those bills were passed by Congress for COVID response, isn't what those funds have been used for by state agencies. I mean, there are school districts that use their pandemic relief funds to buy new HVAC systems, construction of a few buildings. Health department has used funding to, support the regionalization, population health strategy centered around community mental health, county health departments. So, and some of those projects, like they've already, signed contracts with contractors and other entities. So there's, would you support the legislature stepping in and making sure that contracts that have already been signed and been honored, or projects that have already been started or completed? Just what do you think about it?
Yeah, I think that we're going to have to look at that on a case-by-case basis. I think that there are certainly some of them are worthy of doing the programs. But again, these are congressionally passed programs to respond to the pandemic, which occurred in 2020, 2021, maybe a little in 2022. It is now 2025, and the federal government is $2 trillion in annual deficit with a $36 trillion national debt. It stands to reason that the Trump administration and Republicans in Congress as well are looking at these funds and others to try to get control of our out-of-control budget. Yes, sir.
Yeah, sure. Good. I didn't know someone's behind me. Nice to meet you, Governor. I was curious if you have a timeline or a time frame on when you will be signing the anti-DEI bill in schools.
Yeah, I haven't received that bill yet. Obviously, that was one of the bills that passed the House and the Senate that was a priority for conservatives, and so we don't have a time frame yet, but it will be sometime in the next couple of 3 weeks that we will look at that and make sure that there's, the staff will make sure that that everything in the bill is up to what we think it says and want it to say. And I'll sign that bill at that time, but sometime in the next 15 to 20 days. Yes, sir.
In terms of getting the tax bill done, PERS was a big talking point on both sides. We had lawmakers with an HB1 UC employees split between the 401k and pension. The Speaker White talked about it's almost upside down and wanted the funding, and you alluded to maybe pulling from the lottery there. But we've heard from some people think that as it stands, it might not be as attractive to bring in a new state employee. Just what are your thoughts on that, and how would you like to see PERS addressed moving forward?
Yeah, so obviously there's an attempt to get additional resources into the public employees retirement system. The fifth tier that was created in House Bill 1, and again, I didn't propose taking lottery proceeds and moving them to the public employees retirement system. How the House did in House Bill 1, but I understand what their point is, and that's a priority for them, and I understand why they did that. There have been those who have said that the changing of the retirement system makes it harder to attract employees. I'm not really sure that's accurate. I'm not sure that is correct. The fact of the matter is, my experience has been, and certainly everyone in the private sector proves this, young people today are not spending 25 and 30 and 40 years at the same employer. Young people today want mobility. And so I actually think that a defined contribution plan that the employee can control and move from location to location may actually be more attractive for the state of Mississippi to attract employees. Now, I'm not saying that that's necessarily in that employee's best interest. Having that defined benefit plan has helped a lot of retirees in the state of Mississippi maintain a similar or even greater style of living than had they not had one. So I'm not saying it's in those individuals' best interest, but I also don't know that it's government's responsibility to tell an individual what they want to do for their retirement funds. You give them the opportunity to have mobility if that's what they want, and I think that's certainly something that that I think will actually turn out to be certainly advantageous to the funding status of the plan. There was a famous politician who ran for governor of Mississippi in 2003 when we had major financial problems in our state that said the first thing you need to do if you're in a hole and want to get out of it, is to stop digging. Tier 5 will, to Lieutenant Governor Hoseman's credit, Tier 5 will allow us to stop digging. There's no question about that. And over time, it will see the unfunded liability of the plan be reduced as more and more people get into that 5th tier. And so, again, I don't think it's completely solves the funding status. By the way, the $25 billion unfunded liability of the public employees retirement system, about $8 billion of that was a decision made by the board to reduce the expected rate of return from 8% to 7%. There was no real reason for them to do that, but that is a decision that the board made. That's $8 billion. They didn't change their asset allocation. They didn't start investing in less risky assets. They're investing in exactly the same assets and the same asset classes at similar levels, but yet they said we're going to earn less money in the future than we've earned in the past, all because their consultants advised them to do that because they didn't want to get sued. Again, that's over a third of the unfunded liability. But again, I think the steps that have been taken last year with additional monies going from employers as well as this year makes a lot of sense. Any other questions? Nobody on? We've got quite a few people participating online, but they evidently don't have any questions, which is good. Very good. Thank y'all for being here. I really do appreciate it. Obviously, it's been a busy time, a good time, but we got a lot of good things happening in our state, and Mississippi has real momentum, and this is Mississippi's time. Thank y'all, and God bless.